the computer. And I'm also going to make sure that this is shared. So like I said, I will share it with the UX Social Club. The UX Social Club is really and truly, it's just a social club for people who are UX designers. We've got some UI designers in there as well, but UX is my passion, and I'm focused on accessibility and usability and design, inclusive design. And that's what I think my whole group is focused on. But today we're going to talk about how do we create case studies easier. So what we're assuming coming into this is that you have the deliverables, you've already done all the work to have create all the content for the case study. It's just, how do I lay this out in a way that makes sense, that it's easy to read, and honestly makes it easy for me as the designer to to put that together. So I'm gonna hand thank you. Okay, I'm just double checking the chat. We've got some new folks joining us. I'm going to be in charge of that. But for now, I'm going to hand this over to Randy Hembrador to introduce himself. It's literally like I'm looking at too many things at once, and the ADHD is okay. I'm going to hand this over to Randy. Randy, please take it away. And I'm so excited to hear what you have to say.
Well, thanks, Megan. Yeah, so hey everyone, I'm Randy. Thanks for joining, and thanks for expressing interest in this tool. So I'm currently transitioning to a UX career right now, and I'm a designer working with Megan on various projects. And this project is something I created to help me build my case studies, which it was a bit of a struggle to get my first one out, and so. I wanted tools, I think, in a certain way that, just kind of didn't quite exist yet. I'd been working on building case studies, my case study portfolio, for many attempts in the past. And so when I was a student, when I was one of Megan's students, one tool she introduced us to was UXfolio. Which is a portfolio website I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with, which I loved because it just eliminated so many balls that needed to be juggled in terms of building a portfolio, and just sort of let me focus on the content. And instead of just trying to build an entire website, here was a bunch of layouts, and that I could just sort of assemble into whatever I needed. But I guess some challenges came with using that website, for me anyway. I think when I would try to build my case studies, and this may be other folks' experience as well. If it is, actually, I'd love a +1 or anything in the chat. But as I would add modules to UXfolio, I would have trouble remembering what I actually finished. They let you add a new row for a paragraph to talk about your research, and then a new one to talk about your wireframes, right? But nobody's really going to kind of get that on their first go within 30 seconds, right? So I found the way I was approaching things, I was trying to build a structure. I couldn't quite remember what I did and what I finished. And then if I did things try to zoom out, right, it would be it would zoom out the browser and it'd affect all my tabs. And it was just very disorienting to try to get a holistic sense of what my document structure was so I could plan it. So I think, yeah, and that was just very disorienting. It was hard to kind of enter writing flow and actually tell a story that I wanted to tell. And so, like any kind of UX case study tutorials that are on the net now, that they all say tell a story, right? The structure of your overall document is very important. And so I found myself wanting a tool to kind of help me build that structure a bit better. And I still very much liked UXfolio, but I found that it was really just good for helping me kind of plot individual details. And I really wanted something more for, kind of higher level document organization. And what I found myself doing was copying and pasting bits of UXfolio into Figma, and then, trying to build it there, and then wanting an easier way to access those UXfolio layouts in Figma. So that is that kind of set the stage for what I built and what I'm going to share with you today. So the template for folks who have already downloaded, as you can see, it's basically like a emulator of UXfolio. It's just UXfolio, like a tiny model kit, like rebuilt in Figma, where you can take UXfolio's layouts, use Figma as your drafting environment, where you can draft your case study content, plan it out, play with the design, do so in an environment that's a bit more familiar, where, if you do something like hold down Command and then scroll to zoom, like you will get like an expected behavior. And then, just play with those different layout options till you have a structure you like, till you populate it with the content that you need, and then till you have a story where you can just basically use UXfolio at that point as your publishing platform, and just easily recreate those elements on the final site. So sorry, that was a bit much. I'll back up a bit and just kind of go into the demo. Hopefully it kind of brings it a bit more into focus. So yeah, for this demo, I'll just sort of run through some of the stuff. I'll go through a little bit of kind of like general case study approach. I mean, there's a lot of material on the web that goes into a lot more detail than I'd be able to do kind of like in this hour. But in general, three kind of key ingredients that I've sort of taken away from the different case study tutorials online are to, like you need a big hook. You need something that kind of gets attention. I mean, if the whole thing is to kind of get engagement from hiring managers, right? Having a big hook up front is very important. And then you kind of, once you sort of have that engagement, you need to, kind of keep it going. And generally that's kind of what a story would be, kind of, you're almost just building bits of engagement to, or like kind of rolling out engagement in little bits to kind of keep the user or to keep the reader engaged, and then to keep it short. So these are all kind of, these are all bits that have been popped up in a lot of tutorials. And so what I will show now is just, kind of how I try to go about accomplishing those three goals. So for this case study, what I'm going to build the case study for in this demo is I'm going to build the case study of how I built this template. That's going to be the case study that I'll be building today. So to start the project off, these are the materials that I developed. Here's a list of materials that I developed.
Are you sharing your screen?
No.
Okay.
So sorry, everyone. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now. Okay, can folks see my screen? Okay, so yeah, to start things off, I just started a Google document. A lot of folks can, just any number of ways to just, just kind of get your initial thoughts out, just as scratch paper. And, to start things off, I just listed those three key ingredients that that I want to try to accomplish with this case study, just to have them as reference. And then, and the materials I generated during the project, here's a list of them, just thinking about it almost like as a sculpture. It's sort of like, oh, what clay do I have to work with? And, for this project, I have the template itself. I have and then I've queued these all up. I tried to do it like cooking show style, where I have all the ingredients chopped and kind of ready to mix together. So this sample I used to organize the original structure. This is, I built a actual page in UXfolio where I included all the modules to analyze them and analyze their structure and inspect their specs. I kept a dev journal during development. So every day I would just kind of keep a copy of the what my progress was at the time, and some notes about what I was excited about and what problems I ran into. And then there was the community page I built. for the template. At one point, I realized that I was getting overwhelmed by the complexity, so I created a map of like, all the different components to try to make sense out of them before I built one of the iterations in the future. And I built a tracker after I had published it and it'd been out in the wild for a while. I wanted to track engagement and see whether or not bumps in the numbers corresponded to certain events. And so, those are kind of my materials that I'll be working with for this particular project. And so with that, the next thing that I would try to do is just kind of, all right, see what sort of story arises from that. Like, so I'm not really going to like write the whole case study here, but then, I'm just going to think about like what the major beats for the story was, and just looking at the materials, right? Like this map of the variants, right? This was something that helped me, where I was kind of doing earlier iterations that are getting overly complicated. I built a map that helped me clarify things. And so that would be a part of the story. And then, this engagement tracker would be something where it would tie to, or where I could learn what the results were. And so I, for kind of like for story frameworks, you can think about, or you can find different frameworks online for how to tell a story. Like for something like, they're often going to have something like exposition, like what's happening at the start, some rising action, climax, and a resolution. So with these just kind of being general story bits, it's like, okay, so what are kind of like, what are the details from here that I can kind of like plug into this structure? And I won't use it kind of everything. I'll just try and think about like what from this story kind of pertains to, or what from this project can kind of fit into the story framework. And so, so for, the exposition, that's generally kind of like the problem that's we're trying to solve. And so, it can be those challenges I talked about with UXfolio just now, kind of like, the kind of inability to kind of like zoom out and get your bearings and understand, and then kind of manipulate document structure. And so that could be stuff like UXfolio screenshots. And then rising action, that could be like when I found myself plugging in screenshots into Figma. Screenshots into Figma. And then climax. So, I made a bunch of versions of this template in Figma where it was just kind of like a mishmash of the different components. But it didn't really kind of turn into a template until I made that variant map and tried to look at the overall structure and then build with a plan. So it could be our latest version built according to a spec. And for resolution, it could be, like things I noticed in the engagement tracker. Or that actually a specific thing I noticed in the engagement tracker was that engagement dipped after initial release, then went back up and became stable after the cleaned up release. So here I have, kind of a general story that I can start plugging things into. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and demo the template. So I went ahead and just go and copied this for the presentation. And let me make sure I'm sharing. Okay. Are folks able to see my Figma right now? Okay, cool. Okay, so I think So one thing with this template, sorry, I guess this part of the presentation, it's going to go a little bit between the case study for this template and actually using the template. So one question that pertains to general use is just this template relies a lot on Figma like variants and Figma auto layout. And so, to make sure that like whatever you designed like in the, or whatever users designed in the template could actually be recreated in UXfolio, the components use auto layout and variant to kind of make sure you have the same restrictions in this template so that whatever you build here can be easily recreated in UXfolio. So was there a Slido question we had, Megan, for this?
I do have a Slido question. If I can steal your screen share for a second.
Sure.
I will do that. So if everyone wants to join us at slido.com, you can use 132749. And the answer, well, this is just a poll and I'm giving it like a 0 to 4, a 1 to 5 kind of thing. How familiar are you with using the Figma auto layout and variants thing? So I'm not entirely certain how this will, oh, I have to show the results. Ooh, okay. So we'll like leave this up for 60 seconds to make sure everybody gets a chance to answer, but it should just be a quick select. How familiar are you? And if you're thinking, what are those? That is also fine because we may need to do a little bit of a, not of a case study, a little bit of a demo on how to use auto layout and variants. I know there are videos out there, but they're not as interactive as having someone to ask questions. So let's look at the results. What? Yes. Okay. So we've used them, but we need more experience. This is actually amazing responses because this is actually what is helpful. This UXfolio case study template will give you more experience with using auto layout and variants. And that I found myself, I found it very difficult to learn variants because it just seemed so magic-y in the background. So it was really interesting to try and use this template and go, oh, the variants have kind of been built for me. And my learning style is like, give me the final solution and let me reverse engineer it. And then I understand it better. And if that's also something you lean towards, then that might be a really good reason to join the UX case study template. Anywho, that's the poll. It looks like we're all in a really similar area. What are those is also it's also a great answer. And you've heard about them but not used them. Yeah, download this template and give it a shot. And I'll stop sharing. And don't forget, I don't know if you're going to this Slido and you're entering this, you should also be able to get to the Q&A. So the upvote questions, add questions that you have, and I'll hand it back over to Randy. But please feel free to add questions. We will make sure to answer those at the end.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Megan.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, that's great. I think, yeah, that's, yeah, as Megan said, like, hopefully this, this case study template, I tried to build it with, kind of with the notion that like, I was trying to build it for somebody who would have like no experience at all with variants or auto layout. And so, but it does rely a lot on it. And so I wanted to kind of make sure there was like some, just give you like light exposure to using them. And like Megan said, that this is ultimately a Figma file that can kind of be picked apart if you really want to get under the hood. But, in terms of just like using this template, I try to keep the demands of those like pretty low. And I actually, I kind of structured what is like a little bit of a mini tutorial to just start using the template. And so, the first thing that you would do when building a case study on UXfolio is to just enter your project information, which would appear in a header, at the top of your case study. And so for this template, I took that header and I was kind of inspired by Super Mario Brothers, where you kind of see the first enemy and, you figure, oh, I jump on that. And that's the skills I need for the entire game. And so I made sure that customizing this template would kind of give you an introduction to every kind of Figma function you would need to use the rest of the template. And so as you see here, it comes in 4 steps. And basically the 4 things you would need to kind of do to use the template is to just manipulate font styles and colors globally. So, it just says upfront to, don't kind of, or to just, if you're going to change a font style, like you would need to kind of change, you would need to change the style for kind of everything, which, like would help you kind of think more globally about how type is used. And so, what we would do first is we're going to just enter our case study name. So we'll call this Figma template case study. And then we will call it, and then we enter a project subtitle, project. And then this, you'll see here that this updated automatically too. In general, this template uses components very extensively. So, like you can kind of see what things would look like by updating one master instance of the different elements. And so you'll notice that when I update that, I will see that there are, I can select different font styles. Oh, sorry, actually, no, I'll move on to the next thing. Okay, so in the second step is when the variants start coming in. So the next thing it asks you to do is to update the layout. And so some instructions here to go ahead and select project detail, the project details layer. And so I can do that either by going into the layers panel or just by double clicking itself. And then you'll notice as I do that, this variants, this options panel appears. And so this lets me, just basically use the same, or just, create the same layout customizations as the UXfolio site. So I'll just select whichever ones I want. I'll go ahead and make it, I'll just keep that in the middle, and maybe I will justify to the left, and the mock device, and then maybe I will, and then if I click on the mock device, the more I click into things, other UXfolio options appear as new variants. And so, like I want that to be a dark desktop. Okay, and so I went ahead and did my background there. And then for here, for the third step, it's another sort of Figma function that that's required for this template is to paste images kind of into images. So there will be a lot of image placeholders where, like if you have your case study images, you can just paste them into like the placeholders that are provided in the template. And so I don't really have like here. I should have queued up a image. Sorry about that. We'll do fire trucks. I was hanging out with a nephew, so fire trucks came to mind. And so, this, you can just basically copy any image from, like your materials or from your file system. And then if you just follow the instructions and select the image layer and paste, it'll update that, and you'll see that the thumbnail gets updated and the case study banner gets updated. And so that's a little hard to read, but yeah, we'll say for demonstration purposes that we just pasted that image into the background image element there. And then for the last step, remove the draft effect. And so if we just follow these instructions, we'll just select the header element above and then remove draft effect. And then you'll see that the green line that was there before just disappears. It's basically just borrowing like the green suggested edit indicators from like Google Docs. And so we've went ahead and customized our, and actually if we want to finish this, like we can replace the screenshot in the little computer the same way that we replace the background. So say we want to replace that with an image from the project, say I'll just copy this and say that is our image. go ahead and paste that, follow the instructions, just click until you've selected the screen layer, which I've done, and then paste. And now that is our finished header for the UXfolio case study. Okay, and so next is to move to the actual body editing portion. So you'll see that the header we made appears at the top. For those who are familiar with UXfolio, you'll recognize the footer style. And the way we build the case study content itself is, here are the modules, the different layouts from UXfolio. And what we can do now is just select from this menu and just drop the ones we want. Like I'll go ahead and select this image and text one, hold down, as indicated in the instructions, just hold down Option to create a copy. And then when I drag it and just drop it in the middle, then it just populates. And so, so this is when we can kind of like start thinking about like our case study structure again. So like if I go back to if I go back to this this story I've laid out in the beginning, I have my exposition, like where I'm talking about the UXfolio site itself, and start refining my understanding what the story is too. So I know I'm going to talk about the UXfolio site. I'm going to have some screenshots of when I tried to kind of like remake it in Figma initially. Have a section about my latest spec, and then something that shows off my stats. And so if I go back to the template, right, I can see there's like a module here for stats. So I can go ahead and throw that in. And then, there's going to be a part where I'm going to show different stages, like when I was, and so maybe this column element here. And then maybe I'm going to, want to show like multiple stages. But then you can see from here that like, it's just really easy to drag and drop layout elements, right? And then maybe I can, like kind of give like titles where it's like, let's see, me using UXfolio badly. And then I can just kind of move them around. And then these also, these take advantage of element or of variants the same way that the header did. So if I highlight that and you'll see I have some options that pop up on that for this row here. And if I want to change, what type of thing it is, then I can, select from the same selections as this in the drop down. So any of these rows can basically be any of these layouts, and you can just change them on the fly depending on what serves like the structure of your story. So and then for this, say like, and the toggles will also kind of cycle through these options as well. And just, you'll get whatever UXfolio layout corresponds to the options, that you select here. And then, you click into the elements within the row, those also have their own options. So this recreates pretty much every customization option from the UXfolio site through variants, and then just lets you play with your content and move things around more quickly that way. And then from there, you can go ahead and edit text. You can go ahead and paste pictures. And then one other feature I added in was a lot of times we won't know what like our image content will be, or we haven't prepared it. Maybe we just have like screenshots from Excel or something, and those would be ugly. So if we want to just kind of stay in writing flow, but not without getting hijacked by our images, then this option where you can do idea notes, if you click into select the image, then you can jot down like, this will be stats. And then, like as content starts shaping up, I can go ahead and drag things around in real time, which was another kind of feature missing from UXfolio. And another thing, so I'll go ahead and move over to my current version for this case study, is that I can paste a case study next to it. So, using Awesome Screenshot, you can take a screenshot of like some case study that you think is like a good model for what you're working on. And then, since this is Figma and anything is possible, you can just paste it inside here, and then give yourself a set. If you're worried about like length, like I noticed, like how long does it need to be was a question that popped up a lot. Tell your story first, and if you have doubts or whatever, you can you can pop in a case study that that you think is good, and then place it next to yours. And generally, if you're kind of shorter, then you're shorter. So and then I created, so for those who are comfortable making their own variants, I included an element, or I included a component where you can actually put multiple case studies into the reference. And then on your case study draft, like if I want to compare it to this other one, then I can kind of just do that and then cycle between and just kind of make comparisons that way. And so, you'll see here, right, that I started, I fleshed things out a bit more where, it's like I included my Kpis here. I broke it out into different sections, and just basically got, put notes down for what all of the content will be. And so now it's just a matter of like filling this out. Yeah, and so this is, and then you'll notice for some of this too, like the green is removed. So, that is like, this is content that I wrote it and I like what I wrote and it's done. So I can just start filtering it out. And basically the goal is for me to just, make sure everything kind of gets to green, and that I have some, and that I have like content and a plan for image content. And once all of that has been finalized, then I just churn out the image content and then plug all this content onto the UXfolio site. So yeah, there's other features in it where, I've included the ability to like make customized image fit containers for folks who are comfortable with using variants. And even if you're not, like like Megan said earlier, you can kind of play under the hood and make infinite copies of the template if you want, and possibly kind of like reverse engineer like an understanding of variants that way. And then also there are, let's see. Yeah, you'll see there are also, some of the other kind of like visual, like special effect almost options from UXfolio here. So this is the the computer graphic, and if I wanted to change that to like a mobile device, and if I wanted to make that an outline instead of semi-realistic, all of those options have been recreated here. And so everything that's sort of as long as you kind of just don't like kind of break any or as long as you don't do the let's see, sorry. I mean, you can potentially do like detach instance and break and then move things around with the layout that way and then customize the layout. Just know that if you kind of do that, like you might not be able to recreate it on UXfolio, or you might have to export that section as an image and lose some of the functionality of UXfolio, like, accessibility, compliance, and responsiveness, and, some of that other good stuff. But otherwise, yeah, this is the Lego set. This is currently how I go about going from like a jumble of words and ideas to, structuring my document, and then just dumping the finished version onto the site.
Love it. Randy, this is awesome. You put in a ton of work to make this as easy to use as possible. And I know it's going to help set up people for success before they start paying that $9 a month to host their UXfolio. We've got some questions for you if you're down for that.
Yeah,
I wanted to also make sure that's so amazing. I know Randy worked really hard on this, and it really started with the question of how do I make this easier? Because frankly, as a new UX folio, or excuse me, as a new UX designer, or UI designer moving into the professional world, you're trying to find a way to make your portfolio stand out from the hundreds of other people who are also applying for the same roles that you're looking for. So how do you stand out? It's making sure that you have clearly defined the story from your case study and that you're able to make it aesthetically pleasing and eye-catching for hiring managers. So I think, let's see, darn, stand by. Randy, I'm going to ask you to answer. Oh gosh. Okay. So the most upvoted, it doesn't look like people jumped in to do any upvotes. It's totally okay if you join at slido.com. The number is 132749. Randy, I'll ask you to stop sharing and so we can see your face as you answer. And I'm going to, let's see, top voted one is, since hiring managers really only spend a minute or two per case study or project, what are some tips that you may have to grab their attention and secure that interview?
I think, yeah, that kind of goes to the, one of those things I noticed kind of as being like a main case study ingredient was sort of like a big hook. And so I think, like I noticed too that, my first challenge was finishing a case study. And the second challenge was like getting, having a case study where hiring managers was actually on it long enough to look like they actually read the thing. And so, yeah, like having that big hook, I think is like really important. And it's something, where I think if like folks kind of like build their own websites or whatever, right? Like you put in like a lot of animations and, like maybe type and that's a really effective hook. But like there are I've seen a lot of other ways that are also very effective hooks where you don't have to like really do like all of that. I mean, sometimes a big hook could be just like a good side-by-side image of before and after, just starting off the portfolio, where it's like really obvious, like, kind of like where your design innovation comes in with, with the after picture just next to the before picture. One thing that worked for me, where I noticed like my most successful case study, where I noticed my read time went from like 15 seconds. Like, I mean, recruiters weren't even spending like 20 seconds on my case studies. And then the thing that got it up to like a minute was one of them where I included a news article that like just provided the context of, like what the project was. Like I just had a screenshot of a headline, from that was talking about the content that I did the design for. And so really, yeah, like, high fidelity prototypes, like for this case study, my plan is to just, you'll see it like the first thing I include is going to be this big image, and I plan to include a big animated image of, of just the dragging and dropping and trying to use that as the hook. But, kind of having the big hook, like, and I can't speak to kind of like, like if that's going to be a foolproof plan, but that is definitely, like, I think something I've noticed in a lot of what people, or what a lot of I've kind of been instructed and what other designers have shared with me is just, like make that big splash first. And then, and then the story after that can just be like kind of how you keep that engagement like going forward. Megan, did you want to weigh in on that as well?
Oh, my advice for like how to grab their attention, make it a very interesting, compelling, beautiful picture at the top, and then get to the point as quickly as possible, then unfold your story. So basically you're looking at, if you're reading a novel, you're like, ooh, this cover looks amazing. I'm super excited about the title. This looks like it's my genre. And then you're skipping to the end to be like, hey, it's a happy ending. We know that we accomplished this, this, and this. And then you can dive into the story. Another big thing, and it has nothing to do with the design, but the way to grab a hiring manager's attention during that minute or two that they'll look at your portfolio. Be real specific about what you exactly did on this case study. So one of the things that I see coming out of the boot camps, and this is every boot camp literally across the world, it's tell absolutely everything. And literally that's the hallmark of a junior designer is I'm going to show you all of it plus the kitchen sink. And that is not compelling or interesting. It is a wall of text that hiring managers are like, I just need to know what you did. So one of the things that I'm suggesting to mentees now is at the very top, instead of that typical setup where it's like the tools I use, no one cares. How long did this take? No one cares. What roles did you have? And you just say, I'm a UX/UI designer. That means junior designer. That means I'm not sure I can trust you to take on all of these different aspects. I'm going to have to hand hold you through every single job duty that I'm going to give you. Instead, if you say, I was the UX designer and I conducted information architecture, I did card sorting with users, I did a heuristic evaluation, those things that you did that were super specific to you, include that list of items. That way the hiring manager is like, oh, sweet, I actually need someone who can conduct the heuristic evaluations on all of these different pages. And like, to be super honest, that's kind of grunt work. It's not unimportant. It's extremely important, but it is low value results for like high value pay. So we wouldn't normally send a senior designer in there to be like, do the heuristic evaluation. They would review a junior designer's work to see whether or not they did the correct, heuristic evaluation and came out with good results. So call out specifically what you did and get to the point as soon as possible. Some people really like, for some reason, to like wait until the very end for the money shot, the very exciting, oh my God, here's all this, look at this shiny stuff. That assumes that the hiring manager scrolled to the bottom of the page. We cannot assume that. So big picture, give them like the whole picture up front in as succinct a bite-sized piece as possible, and then tell them exactly what you did. That, and also only highlight the things that you truly contributed to. So if you didn't do any of the UI, that's okay. You can still show that final result and say, what I did was the UX design stuff. So no worries if you're like, I didn't create the style guide. Nobody cares. They really don't want to see a style guide in your portfolio project. They just want to know, what did you accomplish? We got a couple more minutes. I've got a couple more questions. Let's see. So that was, let's mark that as
real quick. I can actually, if I can add to what you just said, yeah, like in terms of like keeping things bite-sized, one thing I try to do when I use the template is that the different content sections, like just notice when like text gets like really long, and one sort of benchmark I tried to aim for is 1 to 2 tweets like per row, like worth of text.
Yes, the tweet size text, that is honestly, and Randy is a genius. Somebody already asked in the comments, which isn't something that typically like, what is it? What did I lose it? Where'd it go? Basically they were asking about the, that variation map you created. Randy has created so many amazing small things that it's ridiculous, but most especially he's a powerhouse in the Google Slides or Sheets. So I'm like, there's a joke in there somewhere. Sorry, my ADHD brain really wanted to capture that. Okay, so oh no, I lost my train of thought. What are you about to say?
What you're looking for, nerd.
Yes, I am a nerd.
Or me, like,
oh my God, nope, I lost it. Okay, no, it was the how can I do the engagement trackers and map of variance? Randy created that from scratch. Like that wasn't something that existed. It was a Google Sheets, and he understands how to do stuff. Honestly, you should do a how-to on Emma on how do I make the Google Sheets do all the stuff that I want it to do. That would be amazing. I
could potentially share the tracker too as like a template.
Sure.
But yeah, I didn't realize they'd be interested in that. So
totally. What are tips on visuals to make your project seem impactful and realistic? So if you don't have industry experience yet, it may be hard with fictional projects. That's a really good one. Randy, take that.
Sorry, can you say it again?
Yeah, I just zoomed through it. Some tips on the visuals to make your project seem impactful and realistic without industry experience. It's hard with these like classroom projects. How did you handle that?
Oh yeah, no. So there's always some real number somewhere, right? So actually, kind of going back to the engagement tracker, one of the reason I actually picked, or the reason I poured in so much time into making a UXfolio template was actually kind of one of the first things I did, like at a boot camp, was that it did seem like something that, like I felt like, because I needed it, other people might need it too. And to the extent I shared it and it was a good thing, that the community page downloads would be some real numbers I could point to. And then, also it's, if you have ideas that, like for designs on things, even if it's like unsolicited, like like I have a ton of ideas on like some UI things I want for Google Sheets, right? Stuff that you talk about in social media, to the extent people get engaged in that, could be real world numbers you talk about. I mean, like ideally, right, like you're working with like, teams or you can freelance work, right? Like stuff would kind of like real world, like, with like customers, right? Like it's a lot easier. It is harder to kind of like tell a story kind of without that real world context, but, and jobs are obviously the best way to get it, but there's always like a way to kind of get something where you can kind of have a story ending. Is there anything you wanted to add to that, Megan, as well?
1 second. I was just zooming away on something. The visuals, yeah, those numbers, it's really awesome if you're able to go back to the people that you did usability testing with early in your class projects, your student projects, and validate some of the information that you were able to like create, and validate that your final idea design or your design idea really solves the problem that you set out to solve. That's probably the biggest issue I see with student projects, is they don't ever like follow up. And even Randy will admit, as he did in one of his other case study portfolio case studies, was that he forgot to check back in with the stakeholder. And that may seem like it's not a ton of impact, but if you can come up with any kind of quantifiable numbers, even if it's number of people, if it's number of times that you made updates, it's just about anything you can think of that could be used as a metric. And then honestly, what I would say is then you talk to all of your friends who are really good at coming up with visual analogies for the things that you want to say. So like just numbers, sure, that's interesting. But if you can also add some sort of media or image to it that makes it feel more impactful, I really love that. Actually, on your gaming, I'm not even sure you're done with that case study, but the one where you talked about the Goombas being like the very first one, those little mushroom dudes or whatever those are, they look like tiny mushrooms to me from Super Mario, that like the Goombas that come after you. That was really, yeah. Oh, sorry. Brittany was asking in the chat for the Google Doc you referenced for the story. I believe that was just an outline that you made. Anywho, okay,
Yeah,
1 second.
I can share that and then just drop it in the chat.
Ooh, how do we generate and present KPIs if the stakeholders didn't provide any real metrics to measure success, or if it's a made up project that didn't launch? Oh my goodness. So that kind of goes back to that same question of quantifiable data. There are numbers somewhere in what you're doing. And if the stakeholder didn't provide metrics, it's a really good idea to learn, hey, what are some metrics for websites like this? So you're going to do some really big Google searching. You're going to ask people who may be in that same industry, like, how would you measure success? Or like, what is it that you're looking for on your website? This is a really good opportunity to start to get a little, what's the word? It's easier to reach out on behalf of someone else than it is to reach out on your own behalf, is what I found. So like, I will reach out to just about any UX manager. I don't care how big they are in a FANG company. It's not my problem. I'm going to ask you a question, or I'm going to ask for some of your time. And I'm doing it because it's something that I want to inform my students about. So asking for them, it makes it really easy. So if you're able to say, hey, you seem to be an amazing person in the marketing area, and you specifically work on this sports website. Can you tell me more about like what it is that you do, that you check? What do you report back on? Tell me more about what it is you do. First, you've made a contact in the industry. That's amazing. And second, you've learned how you might assess a different website. And hopefully you take that information and go, how would I assess the next website? So there is nothing new under the sun in terms of like, it is rare right now to just reinvent something completely out of the blue. So you're not having to like completely invent this. You're just looking for metrics and parameters and words to describe the things that you already know to be true, or the data that you already have. Hopefully that's helpful. Sample Google Doc, love it. Next question. Oh, also I wanted to share that I have the UX Social Club link available. And let's go back to the questions. Resources where we can learn storytelling. Is that the one I have? No, that's workshop tag. I'm actually waiting on a resource to arrive right now. I was part of a Kickstarter. I love a good deck of cards with instructions and information. So it's a deck of cards, and every single one is like how to tell a specific story. So you kind of mix and match your storytelling ideas, and then you align the parts of your portfolio towards that. So I'm definitely going to be sharing more of those resources as I literally get them, which would be amazing. Yes, good question. Dang, did I just click yes on that? What happened to this question? Okay, blah, blah, blah. Resources to learn storytelling. That's actually a great question. Let me get back to you on that. I feel like I have some saved somewhere, but nothing immediately comes to mind. Randy, do you have any ideas on that?
I watched a video, I think, not exactly storytelling, but it was a UX influencer on YouTube named Chun Buns. I don't know if anybody watches her already, but if you just YouTube, pop her name into Google search and do Chun Buns, I think UX case studies. She had a recent video that like gave a good outline where it was kind of like the UX process, but sort of like, treated like a story. And, it was really helpful, I thought, just like a really nice kind of summarization.
Nice. All right, let me make sure it's 1 o'clock. If you need to jump off, totally understand. I'm going to be able to stay at least 15 more minutes, but that's about it. I will encourage you to please check out that link I dropped for the UX Social Club. I dropped it not because it's like a massive money generator for me. Quite obviously, the numbers are visible and accessible on there. It's more to ensure that the people that are joining the UX Social Club Slack channel are what I call capital G, capital P, good people. We're here to connect with each other. We're here to support each other. We're here to give good feedback, thoughtful feedback, and to encourage each other to level up. So that is, oh, thanks, Georgina. That is an amazing link. The Art of Storytelling for Case Studies. Fantastic. Everybody click through to that. What if you're the sole designer for a startup and thus we're a UX UI designer? What I would suggest is pick what you want to be and make that the listing on your LinkedIn. There's only one time in my history that I put front-end developer and UX designer, and that's because I was a front-end developer who learned UX design on the job. It's important for you to be specific about what you want to do in the future. If you want to be that UX generalist, I'm a be everything. I can do all the things. That's great. So I would list the most important things, the ones that you're super good at, the things that you really want to do in the future as those descriptions of my role and what I did. And you can piece them out as UX design. I did this. UI design. I created an entire style guide. Those are really helpful for making sure that you stand out, not just as a UX generalist / UX UI designer, but you can promote how skilled you are in a specific area, which helps you leverage into your next job. That also answers the Megan, if we did the whole project ourselves, how would we list that? List the important stuff. Question, I'll share my screen so y'all can see this. Share screen. There we go. Sorry, all my windows are in the way. Is it okay to get images from Google instead of a free stock image site for our case studies? Use those free stock images. Randy just used that image from Google because he didn't have one instantly available that he had set aside for himself. So honestly, images from Google will get you targeted for copyright violations. So please do not pull images straight from Google. I have seen entirely too many people, and I mean like entirely too many stories, not personal people, but I've heard them say, I got like the cease and desist warning, I got a legal letter, I got in trouble, and it was very squiffy, so don't do that. Unsplash, Pexels, there's a ton. Aside from a bite size of the initial project in the beginning for hiring managers, how often do they look at the process? They don't. Great question. They do not look at the entire process. Do you know why? Because this portfolio case study is simply your highlight reel. It is the sushi size, like portion of, hey, look how awesome I am. You should want to interview me. And then part of the interview process is when you will actually go through the entire process to show, here's how I start with the empathize phase, or with the first half of the double diamond. Like, this is how I start my project, but that's information that they want to know. They want to know that you have a process, but they don't look at the entire project process until you are in front of them in a like case study review or an interview. Sometimes it's with a group where you're walking people through it, but that's it. I'll just want to take a long screenshot of the entire mobile length rather than several individual screenshots. There is a, do I have it? No, I do not. It's called Awesome Screenshot. That is, oh, of the entire mobile length. Ooh, Randy, do you know?
Awesome Screenshot. And then if you do the page
the
inspector
emulator.
Yeah, do page inspector on, or like the inspector on Chrome, just kind of switch to the mobile dimensions.
Ooh, also, this is a good question for you too. Add animation to UXfolio. I hit the cap no matter how I compress the gift. Any tips for that? Interesting.
Yeah, that's some one thing I've done is, and it's pretty labor intensive, but I mean, opening the GIF in Photoshop and kind of, you know, like frame by frame optimization. You can also kind of like optimize colors and try to kind of get the size down that way. Yeah, and I mean, and if you don't mind, or if you don't mind like having the animation as just like a video where the user has to press play. But what's this? Is this a?
It's tiny PNG, but or tiny JPEG. I was like, do you think that they can do GIFs? No, it looks like that's not the thing.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, well. But yeah, keep compressing and like make it as slow as possible. But most important, when you say animation, what exactly do you want them to pay attention to on the animation? Sonia, we did just talk about that. If you put it on mobile view, as in your, on your, like if I right click, inspect, and put this on the phone, and then I want to take a screenshot, then I'll take an awesome screenshot. It's a Chrome extension and it'll take a picture of the entire page. So on mobile, yay, I'm glad you learned a lot. Also, like the animation to UXfolio, a lot of people are just putting like scroll GIFs. Don't do that. That's boring. Nobody's going to look at that. And it's also really confusing. It's a cognitive load issue. And like, what is the takeaway? So try and identify what is the exact animation that you would like to describe. Is it because you have a cool interaction? Then have only that interaction as part of your active GIF, not like how you got to that interaction. So try and limit as much as possible in that animation so that the GIF is as small as possible. Also Giphy, if you're using that, and then compress. And then how to tell about us. Keep it short and sweet. Who are you? What do you want to do? What is two truths and a lie? Maybe not the lie, but like just add anything. People are not really reading this, but in case they want to go, who is this weirdo who just applied to my job? That's what they want to see, is just a little bit about you. All right, looks like we've got all of that done. If anybody has any other questions, I am so excited to help you. That UXsocialclub.com thing, that goes to, it's my Patreon. All of the proceeds of it go to support creating more content for how do we like this kind of webinar, putting all sorts of things together. I would be so happy to welcome you to our Slack channel. If there's anything I can do to support you, please connect with me on LinkedIn. Actually, Randy, you should drop your LinkedIn. I'm like,
oh yeah.
linkedin.com/Megan. Please feel free to connect. And I know Randy would be happy to as well. So let us know if there's anything we can do. Ooh, somebody said use Easy GIF. Yes. Okay. I will go look at that. Easy GIF. Thanks, Raymond. Okay. But with that, I think we're done for the day. So let me know if there's anything else you need. I'm going to click stop recording